All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be our next video on ecology. And I just want to go through and apologize for the poor slides and animations that I'm going to have. Before the virus, my computer broke, and Apple is not currently going through and fixing any of the computers. So all of this software that I had on that computer to make all of my animations on Adobe and to use Keynote, I currently don't have access to until we go back to school. So this is what we're going to temporarily use, just these Google Slides to get through our video content. So let's get started on this next video. So ecology is going to be relationships between organisms and their physical environments. And eco really means house. So we can talk about the relationships between the organisms themselves, different species, but also their physical environment. And we call interdependence the dependence between or among individuals or things. So what things do you depend on to survive? Well, you're going to depend on water, shelter, food, and then your physical environment, the air quality that you're breathing, the type of environment you live in. And all of these things have an effect on your life and then the lives of the organisms around you. So if we're looking at levels of organization, we already had a video on levels of organization. Really what we've been looking at, if we go to the bottom here, is we've been looking at molecules, and then we've been going into cells, tissues, and organs. And then if we go outside of this level of organization, we have galaxies, solar systems, and the Earth. Ecology is the study of this middle section here. We're looking at the biosphere, the biomes, the ecosystems, the communities of populations, and the organisms. So when we're talking about the biosphere, we're referring to all living things on Earth. So if we look at this list here, well, which of the following are parts of the biosphere? We have zebras, ants, carbon soil, humans, and Ebola. Well, if we look at this, zebras and ants, they are definitely alive. Carbon soil, not so much. And then humans are definitely alive. If we look at Ebola, since we're talking about viruses, viruses are going to meet a lot of the requirements for life, but they cannot reproduce and they need a host. So technically, since we are in the topic of talking about viruses, Ebola is not going to meet this qualification for all living things on Earth, or when we're talking about this part of the biosphere. Now, if we're looking at the hierarchy of this individual, of ecology and the individual systems that we're looking at, well, if we're thinking about fish, we have individuals here. And these individuals are then going to make a population. And that population is going to make a community. So you have different species within that community. That community is going to make an ecosystem. So now we're referring to biotic, the living things and the abiotic systems in there. We have our biome, and then we have our entire biosphere. So everything that we're talking about has levels of organization and hierarchy. And then we want to think about, well, what is the difference between a community and a population? Well, a community is going to be all the living things of different species interacting with each other, whereas a population, we're referring to organisms of the same species. So if we look at this image here, well, this has a variety of different plants. It most likely has fish, animals, and organisms living in here. So we can have a conversation about the levels of hierarchy here, the individuals within the stream, the populations within the stream, the communities within the stream, and we can go through and as a scientist study each of these individual things and look at it through different lenses to better understand what's going on in this particular environment. So when we're talking about the factors associated with this, well, abiotic means non-living. And I've already gone through and used that a little bit. And then biotic is going to be living. Abiotic factors are going to be things like sunlight, heat, precipitation, wind, and soil. Whereas biotic are going to be animals, plants, mushrooms, and bacteria, right? Anything that is living. So if we're looking at this, these factors play a major role in our biospheres, our communities. They have an individual role with the populations and the individuals that are associated with whatever that environment is. So we have to go through and we have to think about how we're going through and classifying these factors and then how they have relationships with the organisms in that environment. Now, ecosystems, when we're talking about ecosystems, well, they are going to need a couple of things. When we talk about matter cycling, well, we're talking about the water cycle, the carbon cycle, the nitrogen cycle. So they're going to need matter cycling. They also need energy cycling. And energy cycling is things like food chains and food webs. If any of you guys have ever seen these little ecospheres, well, these are little ecospheres that you can actually buy online for like $40 or $50. Mrs. Sand actually has one of these on her desk. What we see are these little tiny shrimp in this ecosphere. And this is literally a little ecosystem that you can have on your desk, and it's going to be affected by the environment. There's nitrogen cycling going on inside the water so that the shrimp can survive. You have to have your ecosphere by a light source so the shrimp can go through, the algae can reproduce, and the shrimp can go through and consume some of the algae. Then the algae go through and remove the nitrogen from the water. So when we're thinking about this, there's individual ecosystems and there's individual communities and populations that we can go through and look at. And it really depends on what lens we're going through and then how we go through and study this when we talk about matter and energy cycling here.